Okay, so good morning once again, everyone. So today is December 24, no? So wishing you a Merry and Happy Christmas. Hoping na sana safe pa rin tayo lahat ngayon, no? And let us continue to be safe, no? Malapit na rin tayo matapos sa 2020. So um, we are hoping and wishing na yung 2021 talaga natin is um, mas magiging masaya siya kaysa sa 2020 natin. Okay? So, today, we will be having a new topic to discuss. Basically, yung topic natin ngayon is debt restructuring. Okay? So, nasa liabilities topic pa rin tayo. So, we are now heading towards the tail end of this general topic liabilities. So, malapit na rin tayong matapos dito, no? So, debt restructuring. Okay? So, what is debt restructuring? Debt restructuring basically is the process wherein ito yung ginagawa natin to make concessions, no, to the creditor or to our creditor if we are the debtor, wherein yung para bang pinapagaan yung utang natin because of reasons na yun nga, we are having financial difficulties na kumbaga nahihirapan na tayong magbayad ng utang on the part of the debtor. So, for us to be relieved from that burden na medyo hindi na natin kayang bayaran yung utang, we resort to debt restructuring. Okay, we resort to debt restructuring. So, this is basically concessions we make, we deal or we negotiate to our creditors if we are the debtor, or on the part of the creditor, these are the concessions negotiated to the debtor para sa atin na creditor tayo yung nagpapautang, kumbaga, makaka-extract tayo pa ng kahit konti lang na sana mabayaran tayo despite the debtor being in a bad situation, no? Kumbaga, making good out of a bad situation. Ito yung debt restructuring. Okay? So in general, there are three types of debt restructuring. Okay? There are three types. Ito yung tinatawag natin, number one, na mayroon tayong asset swap. Okay? Number two, meron tayong equity swap. And number three, meron tayong modification of terms. Okay? So, kumbaga, kung titingnan natin ito, no, these first two types, itong asset swap and equity swap, there is payment in general. Okay? Itong modification of terms, ito yung ini-ease up lang yung terms of the debt agreement para maging mas madali para sa debtor. Okay? Walang actual payment. But rather, minomodify lang yung terms para mas maging madali para sa debtor. Whereas, sa asset and equity swap, there is payment. Okay? So, number one, asset swap. Okay? Sa asset swap, as a debt restructuring agreement or as a debt restructuring transaction, is that instead of cash, okay? Instead of cash yung ibabayad natin, yung ibabayad is at a non-cash asset. Okay? Non-cash asset. So, pwedeng ibabayad natin is inventory, or most of the time, okay, most of the time, ang ginagawa talaga natin, ang ginagawa dito sa asset swap is ang binabayad is yung tinatawag natin na PPE or property, plant, and equipment. Okay? The point is, pag sinabi po natin na asset swap, ang ibabayad is non-cash asset. Okay? Sa equity swap naman, as a payment, okay, as a payment, yung ibabayad po natin instead of cash or instead of non-cash asset is that we will issue share capital. Okay? We will issue share capital or equity. Okay? Or equity. So, mababayaran yung utang or ma-extinguish yung utang. In exchange, we will issue share capital on the part of the debtor. Or kung creditor naman tayo, papayag tayo na mababayaran na yung receivable natin sa debtor. In exchange, magiging part owner tayo na company niya or company nila. Okay? That is equity swap. Okay? Yun nga, pag sinabi natin na modification of terms, ini-ease up lang yung terms of the debt agreement. Okay? Pwede na, let's say, if kung in 1 year magju-due na yung utang, pwede natin gawin na, sige, i-extend natin up to 2 years. Or if the interest payment, let's say, is 15%, so ang gagawin lang natin, sige, para mas maging madali sa'yo, debtor, gawin na lang natin 8%. So that is modification of terms. Okay? So, first, let us talk about asset swap. Okay? Ang accounting problem lang naman natin dito pagdating sa asset swap is that how are we going to recognize this? Okay? Diba? In accounting. And number 2, because there is payment and kumbaga, the point is, pinapa-ease up yung utang para, yun nga, on the part of the debtor, makabayad siya, then on the part of the creditor, makakolekta siya na kahit bad yung situation, bad yung utang, kasi nga, the debtor is having financial difficulty, makakolekta pa rin. Okay? So the point is, in asset swap, typically, okay, there is gain on the part of the debtor, okay, gain on debt extinguishment, okay, on the part of the debtor, whereas on the part of the creditor, typically, okay, there will be loss on extinguishment. Bakit gain or loss? Or bakit gain on debtor, bakit loss on creditor? Kasi nga, kung iisipin natin, if we are on the debtor, or if we are the debtor, okay, if we are the debtor, di ba? Kumbaga, normally, yung value ng non-cash asset na ibabayad natin, okay, is that the value is lower than the carrying amount of the liability. So, kumbaga, malaki yung utang natin, binayaran lang natin ng maliit na value. So, on the part of the debtor, gain yun siya sa atin. Di ba? On the part of the creditor, loss siya kasi nga, typically, yun nga, imbes na ganito na malaking amount yung sanang makukolekta natin, however, pumayag na lang tayo na we receive a lower value non-cash asset para kahit papano is that nakakolekta pa rin tayo sa debtor. Okay? So the main problem for this type of transaction is that how do we compute for gain or loss on debt extinguishment? Diba? How do we compute for gain or loss on debt extinguishment? So basically, if we are to compute for this, we have, and this should be remembered na because this is very straightforward lang. The gain or loss on debt extinguishment is basically computed as the carrying amount, okay? Carrying amount of the liability, okay? Carrying amount of the liability less the carrying amount of asset. Okay? Yun lang. Carrying amount of the liability less the carrying amount of the asset. If the asset is higher than the liability, okay? If the asset is higher than the liability, then there is a gain on the part of the creditor, loss on the debtor. Okay? But that is on exceptional cases only. If the carrying amount of the asset is lower, okay, if this is lower than the liability, then that is the normal situation wherein the debtor recognizes a gain and the creditor recognizes a loss. Okay? So that is gain or loss on debt extinguishment. So, diba, kung titingnan lang natin ito, guys, no? Titingnan lang natin ito, class. Kumbaga, we are just comparing the payment versus the financial liability or the liability. Okay? We are just comparing the payment and the liability. Which is, we have to remember this always, pag asset swap, always carrying amount. Okay? Always carrying amount talaga yan siya as required by PFRS 9. No? As required by PFRS 9. Now, there is this concept also na in connection with asset swap. Itong tinatawag natin na dasyon in pago. Okay? Dasyon in pago. Okay? So, what is dasyon in pago? Okay? So, dasyon in pago is, kumbaga, this is a legal term. Okay? This is a legalistic term used in a debt restructuring wherein we have to remember this, asset swap pa rin yan siya. However, pagdating sa dasyon in pago is that ang payment strictly is a property, plant, or equipment. Okay? Is a property, plant, and equipment. Mostly, yung mga land or building, okay? Yung mga fixed property, plant, and equipment, okay? Or fixed properties na on the original term of the loan or on the original term of the debt, these properties were agreed, okay? Publicly documented, okay? Publicly documented na this is a collateral security. So, kumbaga, originally, yung debtor is nangutang, in exchange for the utang, nag-offer siya ng collateral security. And then, when the moment comes na hindi na siya nakabayad, si creditor ngayon is kinuha na yung property, plant, or equipment. Because yun nga, yun yung collateral. That is the shown in pago. So, kung titingnan natin, asset swap talaga, yan siya. Diba? Asset swap yan siya. Yun nga lang, ang difference lang ng typical na asset swap is that yung pinagbabayad, okay, yung pinagbabayad is that yung in-offer na collateral. Okay? But the concept is, when it comes to accounting, same treatment. Compare the carrying amount of the collateral asset versus the carrying amount of the financial liability. Okay? Of the financial liability. No? So, that is asset swap for you. So, later on, we will have examples for that. Isahin na lang natin sa equity swap. Okay? Equity swap. Para mas mabilis itong discussion natin, no? Okay. So, medyo madali lang talaga yung concept ng asset swap. Yung, let us remember lang talaga na hindi fair market value yung gagamitin, but rather yung carrying amount in computing for your gain or loss on extinguishment. Okay? So, next, itong tinatawag natin na equity swap. Okay, itong equity swap. So, equity swap, again, payment pa rin siya, but instead of non-cash asset, okay, instead of non-cash asset, yung ipambabayad natin is issuance of shares, no? Issuance of shares. So, dito, medyo may pagkakaiba tayo ng konti sa asset swap. Why? Because in the computation of the gain or loss on debt extinguishment, we have to prioritize, okay, 3 values which we will use in the computation, no? So that is first priority natin na dapat natin gagamitin is the fair market value of shares issued if it is determinable or if it is available, no? Fair market value of the shares issued, okay, issued by the debtor, or fair market value of the shares received by the creditor. If that is not available, okay, we will use fair market value of the financial liability. Diba? Fair market value, kung hindi yan siya available, okay, if the fair market value of the financial liability is not available, we will use carrying amount of the financial liability. Okay? Or the carrying amount of the liability. Now, with this situation, okay, kung titingnan natin ito, if we will use these 2 values, let's say, kung hindi available ang fair market value ng shares issued, so we will use financial liability, fair market value. Or, kung available siya, then basically, we will use the fair market value of the shares issued because this is per priority. Remember that, ha? This is per priority now. The point is, kung titingnan natin ito, kung itong dalawa yung gagamitin natin, okay, there is gain or loss on debt extinguishment. Bakit? Kasi nga, the fair market value of the shares issued or of the financial liability basically is different from the carrying amount of the liability. Diba? Kasi yung carrying amount ng liability, yun yung ini-extinguish natin. So, they have different values. So, basically, it will result to a gain or loss on debt extinguishment. Di ba? However, if these two is not available, then obviously we will use the carrying amount of the financial liability, thereby obviously resulting to a nil gain or loss on debt extinguishment. Bakit? Kasi nga, same na yung carrying amount na ginamit pang bayad kumbaga versus the carrying amount of the financial liability. Diba? So, number 1, no? Number 2, remember that concept ha? Baka malito kayo niyan. Baka kasi pag yung available lang is carrying amount of financial liability, then mag-compute kayo ng gain or loss, then that is very time consuming because yun nga, zero talaga yung lalabas dyan. Diba? So, number 2, okay, number 2 is that because there is now this issuance, okay, there is now this issuance of shares. Okay, there is now this issuance of shares in exchange for the liability. And we use the fair market value, or basically the value given in exchange for the liability on the part of the debtor basically is that is different, di ba, from your par value of the shares. Okay? That is different from the par value of the shares. So ngayon, because the value of the shares issued is different from the par value, generally, it will result to a share premium. Diba? It will result to a share premium. So how will we compute for the share premium? If the fair market value of the shares issued is used, then fair market value of shares less par value of shares. Okay? That is share premium. Okay? If the fair market value of the financial liability is used, then instead of the shares, we'll use fair market value of the liability compared to the fair value again. So that is share premium. If those two is not available, okay, if this two is not available, then we will use carrying amount. Okay, we will use carrying amount. So carrying amount of the financial liability plus the par value of the shares. So that is your share premium. Diba? So yan lang yung mga important concept natin dyan. No? So, let's have an example. Okay? So, let's say we have this problem. Okay? We have this problem. Okay? So, Baguio Company is experiencing financial difficulty. So, nag-negotiate daw si Baguio Company ng restructuring sa creditor. So, obviously, si Baguio Company is the debtor, no? So, yung carrying amount, okay, yung carrying amount ng loan, okay, or ng note payable is 5 million. Okay? So, yung creditor natin, si First Bank. So, may two options. Okay? Number 1, this is an asset swap. acceptance of a land owned by Baguio Company. Fair market value is 4 million. Okay? Fair market value is 4 million. Historical cost or yung carrying amount, carrying amount, 2.8. Okay? Number 2 option, this is equity swap. Okay? This is equity swap. Acceptance daw or issuance of an equity share capital of Baguio Company, 40,000 shares, na yung fair market value is 120, okay? With the par of 100. So, let us deal with asset swap first, no? Let us deal with asset swap first. So, number 1, the first thing that we need to do is to compute for any gain or loss on debt extinguishment. Okay? So, to compute that, carrying amount of the debt or the liability, that is 5 million. Diba? Carrying amount of the non-cash asset, or in this particular instance, the land, that is 2.8. Okay? So, carrying amount minus 2.8, okay? Carrying amount, so that is 5 million, diba? Less 2,800,000. Then we have 2,200,000 as your gain on the part of the debtor. Kasi nga, kung titingnan natin, yung debt, yung utang natin is 5 million, babayaran lang natin ng 2.8. Diba? Babayaran lang natin ng 2.8. So, gain on the part of the debtor. However, this is loss on the part of the creditor. Okay? So, 2.8. Now, how are we going to record that? Okay? How are we going to record that? So, obviously, normal entry lang. Nagbayad tayo ng utang. So, that is debit notes payable at 5 million. Typical record of payment. So, i-credit natin yung asset na ginawa nating pangbayad. So, that is credit land at 2,800,000. Diba? Then, and by the way, this is on the part of the debtor pala, ha? Okay, that is on the part of the debtor. Then, recognize the gain on debt extinguishment. Okay? Gain on debt extinguishment at 2,200,000. So, that is your entry. No? Extinguishment. Okay? That is 2,200,000. So, yan lang yung entry mo. And by the way, any gain or loss on debt extinguishment, whether asset swap yan siya, or equity swap, or modification of terms, let us remember, this is to be presented in our profit or loss statement. Okay? Presented in the profit or loss statement. Okay. So that is your asset swap. Okay? Now, let us now consider your equity swap. Because asset swap, that is the first situation only, no? So, let us consider the equity swap. Okay? So, sa equity swap naman, okay, sa equity swap naman, that, in this particular example, okay, given yung fair market value of the shares issued. So, basically, ito yung gagamitin natin kasi nga ito yung priority. Di ba? So, fair value of shares, okay, that is computed as your 40,000 shares, di ba? Multiplied by the fair market value of 120 per share. So that is basically 40,000 times 120. So that is 4,800,000. Your carrying amount, okay, your carrying amount, that is 5 million. So, your payment is 4,800,000. The utang or the debt is 5 million. So, there is a 200,000 gain on the part of the debtor. Okay? Now, aside from that computation, we will compute the share premium. So, again, the fair market value of shares, we have 4,800,000. Then the par value, okay, the par value of your shares, that is computed as 40,000 shares issued multiplied by the par value of 100. So that is basically 4 million. Diba? So 4,800,000 fair market value less the par value, that is 800,000. No, that is 800,000. Ano tong 800,000? This is your share premium. This is your share premium. So how are we going to record this? Again, debit, debit notes payable. Okay, debit notes payable at 5 million. Credit share capital. At, okay, remember this, share capital is always recorded at par value. Diba? So that is 4 million. Credit your share premium because the normal balance, okay, of a share premium account, that is a credit, di ba? 800,000. Then, credit your gain on debt extinguishment at 200,000. So, medyo madali lang. Diba? So, that is your entry. Okay, that is your entry. Okay? So, that is for asset swap and equity swap. Okay? Now, modification of terms. Okay? Modification of terms. Okay. Now, sa modification of terms, okay, sa modification of terms, yun nga, easing up of debt agreement lang to. No? However, we also need to recognize gain or loss. Kasi nga, the point is, in substance, Okay? In substance. Kumbaga, pag minomodify na yung terms of debt, mawawala na yung original debt. Okay? In substance. Na? Thereby, pag nawala na yung original debt, okay? Pag nawala na yung original debt, makaka-create na tayo ngayon or it will create a new debt. Diba? So, the difference, okay, the difference between the new debt and the old debt, that is your gain or loss, or that is your gain or loss. Okay, that is your gain or loss. Okay? Now, in the modification of terms, okay, or in a modification of terms agreement, okay, in a modification of terms, we need to, remember this, we need to consider, okay, we need to consider if the modification is substantial or not substantial. Why is this important, or why do we need to consider if the modification of terms is substantial or not substantial? Because this will affect how are we going to record the transaction. Okay? Now, if the modification of terms is considered as substantial, we need to de-recognize. Okay, we need to de-recognize the old liability and recognize the new liability. Pag substantial. Okay? Pag not substantial siya, okay? If the modification of terms is considered as not substantial, then we are allowed, or kumbaga, hindi na natin i-de-recognize yung old liability and continue recognizing it. However, we just need to recognize the modified terms. Okay, we just need to recognize the modified terms. Okay? So, ngayon, what is our gauge? Okay, what is our gauge? If substantial ba siya or not substantial? Okay? The guideline states, okay, the guideline states, substantial daw siya if the gain or loss, okay, the gain or loss on the modification of terms is 10% or more. Okay? Is at least 10%. So, substantial. No? 10% or more. Ha? Yun yung sinabi ng standard. At least 10% daw. So, 10% or more. Not substantial siya, obviously, if less than 10%. Okay? If that is less than 10%. Diba? So, that is substantial. Okay? Number 2, okay, na we need to remember, in a modification of terms, parang, okay, parang mag-consider pa rin tayo ng new value, or basically, no, the value, okay, the value of the new liability, kasi nga, modified terms na siya, the value of the new liability basically is computed as the present value, okay, as the present value using the old, or using an effective rate, okay, applicable or applied to the old interest rate. No? Medyo tricky to kasi nga, di ba, typically, yung nakasanayan natin is that if we are to compute for the present value, yung ginagamit talaga natin is is yung new, di ba? New interest rate. However, in a modification of terms, we are to compute for the value of the new liability. For us to get, di ba? For us to get the gain or loss on the modified terms. No? In computing for your present value, we will use an effective rate using the old rate. No? Old rate. Ito yung tricky kasi nga minsan makakalimutan natin tapos yung ginamit natin is yung new interest rate. Hindi. Itong old rate. So, again, the process is compute for the present value of the new terms using the old rate compared to the carrying amount of the old debt. Then that is your gain or loss on debt, or that is your gain or loss on modified terms of the debt. Okay? Then, if that gain or loss is at least 10% of the carrying amount, okay, of the carrying amount of the old debt, then that is a substantial modification of terms. Otherwise, it is not substantial. If it is a substantial modified terms, okay, de-recognize the old debt, recognize the new. Okay? If it is not substantial, continue recognizing the old, recognize only the modification. Okay? Recognize only the modification. Diba? So, that is your modification of terms, no? So, let's have an example. Okay? Let's have an example. So, to. So, due to extreme financial difficulties daw, Armada Company negotiated a restructuring of its 5 million note payable, of its 5 million note payable at 10% old interest rate, which is due to be paid on December 31, 2018. Now, the unpaid interest on the note is 500,000. Okay, is 500,000. So, the creditor agreed na, sige, papayag na ako nito kasi kung hindi ako papayag, baka hindi na ako mabayaran. No? So, inaccept. Ngayon, pumayag ang creditor na 4 million na lang daw yung utang instead of 5 million. And, hindi na niya to pababayaran. Itong unpaid interest. And also, the creditor agreed na instead of 10%, 8% na lang yung interest rate. Diba? Ang bait ng creditor. And then, finally, inallow niya na instead na mag-due siya December 31, 2018, which is malapit na, kumbaga, during at this problem, no? Extend natin ng 3 years from the date of maturity. So, yun yung modified terms. Okay, yun yung modified terms. So, the first thing that we need to do is compute for the present value of the new debt. Di ba? Kasi yun yung or because primarily, the present value, basically, that is your value of your new debt. No? So ngayon, to compute that, alam naman natin yan, di ba? Because that is what we learned na from our previous topic, no? So, compute for the present value. So, number 1, let's compute for the principal first. So, the principal value is 4 million. So, the present value factor of 1, now, ito yung sinasabi natin kanina na yung ginamit is ang old rate, 10%. Hindi yung new. Diba? Remember that. Kasi nga, ito, okay lang to kasi medyo mabait yung problem. Hindi tayo binigyan ng other effective rate. Pero, there are instances wherein, diba? There are instances wherein na, aside from this, bibigyan pa tayo ng 8%. So, baka malito na tayo. No? Always use the old rate. Okay? Always use the old rate. So, for the principal, we'll use present value of 1, which is at 0.75. Diba? So, the present value of the principal, that is 4 million times 0.75. So, that is 3 million. For the interest, okay, for the interest, we will use present value of ordinary annuity kasi nga, in essence, di ba, interest will be received in multiple cash flow. So, ordinary annuity na tayo. Unlike for the principal, wherein, one flow lang siya, meaning, isang beses lang natin matatanggap. Di ba? So, that is why present value of 1. So, the interest now, di ba? So, kung i-compute natin yan, that is computed as your 4 million, then, times 8%. So, times 8%. So, we have an annual interest of 320,000. Di ba? Using the new rate tayo kasi nga we are computing for the new annual interest multiplied by the present value factor of an ordinary annuity na 2.49. Okay? We have the present value of the interest at 796, okay? 800. So, itong dalawa, pag i-total natin yan, the present value of the new debt is 3,796,800 pesos. Now, we now have this value. So, the next step is compute for the gain or loss. Okay, compute for the gain or loss. So, carrying amount of the debt, we have 5 million, which is the principal, and the unpaid interest of 500,000. Diba? So, that is 5,500,000. Now, never forget, no? Never forget na in computing for the carrying amount of the loan or of the debt, whether asset, equity, or modification of terms, always include unpaid interest. Okay? Always include unpaid interest. And if there are any, yung tinatawag natin na mga costs for the transaction, like yung mga legal fees, accounting fees, no, yung mga notarial fees, o yung mga direct attributable costs resulting from the debt restructuring. That is part of your carrying amount. So, in this particular example, yun nga, 5 million yung principal plus unpaid interest. So, we have a total of 5,500,000 carrying amount. The present value of the new debt, we have 3,796,800. So, kung baga, 5 million, 5,500,000 yung utang minus 3,796. 5,500,000 minus 3,796,800. We have 1,703,200 gain on the part of the debtor. No? So, how are we, before recording, so, if we are to compare this, 1,703,200 na gain versus to your carrying amount, obviously, that is more than 10%. Diba? So, that is 30.9%. This is a substantial modification of terms. Okay, this is a substantial modification of terms. So, ngayon, because it is a substantial modification of terms, we need to de-recognize and recognize the new debt. Diba? So, how are we going to record that? Okay, how are we going to record that? We will obviously debit the note payable old at 5 million. Diba? Debit the accrued interest expense or our interest payable at 500,000. Then credit, now this is your de-recognition. Itong dalawa, this is your de-recognition. No? Then credit your note payable new or recognition of your new note payable, which is at 4 million. Diba? Then, diba this is a gain? No? So that is gain on debt extinguishment. Okay? Gain on debt extinguishment at 1,703,200. No? Now, ngayon, kung papansinin natin ito, hindi balance yung entry natin, di ba? No? Hindi balance kung ito lang. Now, ano yung kulang dito? Okay? Ano yung kulang? Yung discount on note payable. Okay? Which is computed as, di ba? Yung, kumbaga, concept natin sa bonds payable, kung paano yan siya kinocompute, yung face amount na 4 million, di ba? This is your face amount minus your present value, which is yung present value natin, di ba, is 3,796,800. So, ito yung face amount, ito yung present value. Then, we have your discount on note payable at 4 million minus 3,796,100. So, we have 203,200. Diba? We have 203,200 na discount on notes payable. Obviously, discount yan siya. So, that is a debit to our entry. Diba? So, note payable new gain on debt extinguishment. Okay? 4 million. Then, yung gain natin, which is 1,703,200. So, that is our entry. Okay? Again, debit, note payable owed at face amount. Debit, interest payable, 500,000. This is your de-recognition. Okay? This is your de-recognition. Now, your recognition of the new liability, credit the note payable 4 million, credit your gain na 1,703,200, then debit your 203,200. Okay? Actually, no, kung titingnan talaga natin ito, okay? Kung titingnan to, to be practical, no, we can forgo with this entry. Itong dalawa. Itong note payable, credit, credit note, debit note payable, and credit note payable. Kasi kung titingnan nga natin ito, di ba? Kung titingnan natin ito, offsetting effect lang yan siya. Di ba? Offsetting effect. So, instead of recognizing this, okay, we can also do, kasi nga offsetting effect lang yan siya. Note payable, 1 million. Okay? Note payable, 1 million. Pwede rin yan. Diba? Kasi kung titingnan natin, same lang yung effect nun. Entry. This is your practical entry for that. Debit only, 1 million. Kasi yung nga, na-recognize na yung existing doon na 5 million. Then, kumbaga, recognize lang din naman tayo. Bawasan na lang natin. Debit 1 million. Diba? And, which is, itong entry na to, okay, itong entry na to, kung, okay, kung, example lang, this is a not substantial modification of terms, ito din yun. Diba? Ito din yan siya. The only difference is that instead of using the term gain on debt extinguishment, okay, instead of using the term debt extinguishment, gain on debt modified terms. Diba? But in essence, same lang yung concept niyan, no? Terminology lang yung ginamit. Okay? So, that is to be practical. Remember that, ha? Okay. Now, ngayon, if we are to continue, no? If we are to continue this, assuming, yun nga, tapos na tayong mag-entry. Then, obviously, continuation yan, yung 3-year period, syempre, gagawa tayo ng amortization schedule to recognize your payment of interest and recognition of your interest expense because of the discount, di ba? So, ito na yun siya, no? Yung amortization schedule natin. Okay? So, obviously, alam naman natin na familiar na kayo nito because we have already dealt with this in our topic with notes payable and bonds payable, no? Simple lang naman, di ba? Interest paid, this is obviously based on nominal rate, no? Using the face amount. Okay? Typically, di ba, effective rate is different from nominal rate, but in this case, di ba, same lang yung dalawa. So, this is 10% all, no. Okay, 10% nga, sorry. So, this is 10%, 10%. Ang kaibahan lang, di ba, pagdating sa interest expense is we will use this, we will multiply the carrying amount which is equivalent to your present value on the date of restructuring. Diba? Which is ito ngayon, 3,796,800 multiplied by 10%. So that is your interest expense. So yung kaibahan nga lang is that pag interest paid, always use the face amount. Whereas, pag interest expense, diba, effective interest schedule, use the carrying amount multiplied by the effective rate. Which is, in this case, the effective rate is equivalent to your nominal rate. So, pero, yun nga, because the carrying amount is different from your nominal, from your face amount, iba talaga yung mare-recognize na interest expense. Diba? So, 379,680 for year 1, 385,648 for year 2. Ito lang yan, no? Carrying amount multiplied by 10%. Diba? Ito, multiplied by 10%. Diba? Then, the difference between the interest paid and the interest expense, that is your discount amortization. Okay? That is your discount amortization. Now, assuming 12/31/2019 na, if we are required to make an entry for this, obviously, for the payment, okay, for the payment, this is on the books of the debtor, debit, interest expense, credit, cash. Diba? 320,000. For the amortization of the discount, okay, debit, interest, expense, credit, discount on notes payable. Ito yung originally debited natin. Di ba? Ito, i-amortize natin to dapat. Di ba? So, discount on notes payable na 59,680. Or, to be practical, isahin na lang natin. We can also make this entry. Kung hindi na tayo malito niyan, pwede natin yan siya i-combine. Interest expense at 379,680. Debit, discount on notes payable na 59,680. Credit, cash na 320,000. So that is a 12/31/2019. Okay? In 2020, same pa rin yung gagawin natin. Di ba? So, typical entry na lang after the modification of terms. Okay? So, that's it. Okay? So, we are done with debt restructuring. So, I hope na kahit short lang tong discussion natin, simple lang, at least nakuha niyo yung major points and concepts sa discussion, no? So, this ends our discussion for today. So, again, Merry Christmas and hoping and wishing for a more prosperous and beautiful 2021. No? Mas sana, hoping, praying to God na mas magiging mabait 2021 sa atin lahat. Okay? So, Merry Christmas and goodbye everyone.